Hey everybody, see you all rolling in now as the doors open and you get to claim your seats. Welcome to the January online meetup with Rancher. I'm your host, my name is Adrian Goins. You might actually see me show up in the list as Shannon Williams, but it's not true. I'm not Shannon Williams. Shannon normally hosts these, he's not available today, so I've stepped in to help out. And I will talk slowly for another few seconds to let some more people roll in the door. And I always describe this part as like Black Friday outside of Walmart where the doors open and people come rushing in, or maybe it's like a Led Zeppelin concert, or I don't know. Anyway, let's get going here. So, I'm Adrian Goins. I'm the Director of Community at Rancher, and I'm joined today by Bill Maxwell, who's Technical Product Manager, and Murali Parulu, who is Principal Software Engineer here at Rancher. And today we are going to talk about how to secure your production-grade Kubernetes clusters with Rancher. We have a fantastic demo lined up for you today. But before I can get into that, there's some housekeeping. So this is a meetup. It's not a webinar. And since it's a meetup, that means that it's casual, it's open for you guys to ask questions. There's a little questions tab in the GoToWebinar dialog box thing there. And we encourage you to ask questions. Ask a question as soon as you think of it. If you want the question answered privately, go ahead and put something in there that says, private in parentheses, and we'll just answer it in text. Most of the questions will be answered. Well, most of the questions will be answered live. I was going to say they'll be answered in text. That's not actually true. We have two other people here assisting us today with the questions. So that's Jason Shipek and Matt Nicol. And it looks like Tom's also here and Matthew's here. So we've got a lot of people from Rancher here to help you out. We also, because it's a webinar, may have problems with demos, but that doesn't mean that we won't continue. If you've ever been to a Rancher webinar before, or sorry, a Rancher meetup before, you know that the demon of demonstration rears his head, and sometimes things don't work. But we'll troubleshoot, we'll fix, and we'll ask questions, and we'll talk, and so on and so forth. There are no bad questions. The only thing that I ask is because we do have a lot of people here today, and we want to try and stay reasonably close to the time that we have allocated. Please try to keep your questions on topic. If there's something that you ask that we think is better suited for a different channel, we might just reply to you and ask you to take that elsewhere, or to find us offline, and we'll work with you directly. This is being recorded. So the other thing about these things is we're notorious for going over time. And so if you have to drop off near the end because you've got another engagement or something, that's totally fine. After the meetup's over, you'll get an email with a link for where you can go and download the video. And so don't sweat it. They also get posted to our YouTube channel. So that's youtube.com/c/rancher. So even if you don't want to download it directly, you can also find it there. You can share it with your friends. You can do whatever. And speaking of sharing, if you are on Twitter, please take a picture of yourself at the meetup and fire off a tweet. The hashtag Rancher Meetup. We like to collect these, see who's here. We like to include them later. You see we've got lots of people here who've joined previous meetups. So let us know you're here, and let's engage. During the meetup, as well as after the meetup, we have resources available for you. One of those is the Rancher users Slack. If you don't have an invitation for that, you can go to slack.rancher.io, put in your email address. Slack will send you an invitation. You can join there. That's the primary place that you'll find the majority of the community. We also have forums. Slack is better for real-time responses. There are literally thousands of people registered. There are hundreds of people online at any given time. The Rancher engineering staff and field engineering staff also hang out there, so you can get your questions answered there. But the forums are also excellent if you want to search for longer term information or problems that people might have had in the past. Both of those are fantastic resources for you. Today's agenda is relatively simple. I'm going to give you an overview of Rancher, and then I'm going to hand it off to Bill, who's going to talk about the current state of Rancher 2.3 and what's coming with Rancher 2.4. Bill's going to talk about some of the security challenges that exist in the Kubernetes ecosystem today, and then we're going to hand it off to Murali for demos. Throughout this, we'll pause for questions, or if there's any questions that we don't answer during the presentations, we'll address those at the end. And we will do our best to stay for as long as it takes to answer all of the questions that you have. So let's just get started and let's have fun. There are two key pillars of a successful Kubernetes strategy. So the first thing that you need is a certified Kubernetes distribution. We want to enable compute everywhere, and to do that, you need to deploy certified Kubernetes distributions everywhere that you need compute. That's in the data center, that's in the cloud, that's on your desktop, that's in branch and edge locations. That's the first pillar. But then beyond that, you also need a way to manage all of these disparate Kubernetes clusters. You need to deploy a centralized management control plane that delivers 3 key capabilities: consistent cluster operations. This will enable IT ops teams to manage all of your certified Kubernetes distributions with a consistent interface, regardless of who actually developed the distribution or where it runs. Then you need security, policy, and user management. This will enable IT operations teams to automate processes and apply a consistent set of user access and security policies to all of your clusters, no matter where they're running. But then you also need shared tools and services. So any Kubernetes management platform needs to provide seamless access to DevOps tools and services that include application packaging, CI/CD, logging, monitoring, and service mesh. PowerPoint just died on me. Oh, that's crazy. It's not even going to my next slide. There we go. So Rancher addresses exactly these challenges. So from certified Kubernetes distribution, we support any certified Kubernetes distribution. For on-prem workloads, we offer Rancher Kubernetes Engine, which we lovingly refer to as RKE. For the public cloud, we support all major distributions, including Amazon EKS, Microsoft Azure AKS, and Google GKE. And then for edge, branch, desktop workloads, we offer K3S, which is a certified lightweight distribution of Kubernetes. For centralized management, well, if you're here, you know about Rancher, which is our flagship product. It's the industry's most widely adopted Kubernetes management platform. It's 100% open source. In fact, everything that we do is 100% open source. And it has more than 100 million downloads. It has more than 27,000 deployments. It enables production quality Kubernetes everywhere by delivering on the key requirements for Kubernetes management: consistent cluster operations. So we provide simple, consistent cluster operations that include provisioning, version management, visibility and diagnostics, monitoring and alerting, and centralized audit. For security policy and user management, Rancher enables you to automate processes and apply a consistent set of user access and security policies for all of your clusters, no matter where they're running. And then for shared tools and services, Rancher provides a rich ecosystem catalog of services for building, deploying, and scaling containerized applications. This includes app packaging, CI/CD, logging, monitoring, and service mesh. If you haven't already looked at Rancher, I encourage you to go to rancher.com. There's links to it from there. You can go to github.com/rancher and find all of the projects that we have going on. Pull it down, take it for a test drive. It's fast, it's easy, it's extremely powerful, and it's absolutely worth taking a look at. But I'm guessing that since you're here in the Rancher meetup, you probably already run Rancher, and you're probably more curious about what's happening next with Rancher. So for that, Bill, are you ready?
I am. Do you want to hand over?
I will hand you, yes, I always like to ask if you're ready before I just hand you the presentation, and you're like, oh, all right, making you the presenter, and Bill will take it from here.
All right, this should be looking at the same slide. I think we seamless
Yep.
handoff.
Yep.
So just a couple of product updates. Rancher 2.3 is the current version of Rancher. The latest is 2.3.4. This just shipped, I think, last week. We had some vSphere driver improvements. Kubernetes 1.17 is GA now, and I think made to the default. And then Istio 1.4.3 was updated to the latest version, or we updated to the latest version of Istio. So users that are using Rancher's integration with Istio, they can take advantage of the latest version. Yeah, 2.4 update. 2.4 is the next major release of Rancher. It's scheduled for early Q2. We're looking kind of the key features there to improve scale and performance. We've been looking at it previously. We've noticed that Rancher, when you add more and more clusters, ends up consuming a lot of memory. We found some key consumers of that memory, and we found a way to mitigate that. So we're seeing a huge improvement in memory consumption and CPU usage on Rancher 2.4. So those fixes should be landing in a preview soon, and we expect, I think the current posted 100 clusters is kind of at the upper end with some rather large hosts. We're expecting many more, at least 5x number of clusters on smaller boxes. So we'll be updating the guides and the docs on that. We're looking to, we're also seeing some interesting gains using our K3's product. So we'll have some numbers to share on that as we get closer to release. We're also working on zero downtime cluster upgrades. So as we're working on making it easier, we've made it easier in 2.3 to get updates for Kubernetes. Now we're working on improving the deployment upgrade strategies for rolling those out for users. And then K3s, we've just been seeing more and more adoption for that and moving it towards the edge. So we're looking to bring that into the product or improve the management within the product and being able to import the cluster and upgrade the Kubernetes version that's running on those clusters. Today, we'll be looking at the 2.4.0 Alpha 1 preview, which shipped earlier this month. It's got a couple of key features that we'll be looking at today. Is the CIS benchmark scan that is going to be GA'd in 2.4. And so we'll be showing how that ties into the overall security work we've been doing over the last year, and just kind of rounding out that story. The other ones that I think most people that have used Rancher for a while be excited about is you can now assign group membership to global roles. So you can have all your Rancher admins just tied to an AD group now. I know that's been something that's been asked for a while. And you can also customize those global roles. So that's also coming in. That's also available in this preview. And we'd love for you to download it and try it out and let us know what you think. Yeah, but on the topic of today's meetup, when we're looking at security in Kubernetes, the landscape is fast moving and it's changed quite a bit. Over the last year, we've really seen adoption ramp up and actually people putting it through its paces. Kubernetes, the project has released its open source security auditing and its reports there and set forth its plan on how it's moving forward. And just sort of to put that in context, I believe we looked and we saw, I think there were 3 CVEs for Kubernetes in 2018, and last year that ramped up to 19 CVEs, which just means people are looking at it, they're diving into it. We're seeing it in more production use cases. So being able to the pace at which updates and the adoption of Kubernetes is coming at is really moving fast. But it's also as the tooling has evolved to it's still a fairly complicated stack, and how to configure all of the different moving parts in a secure way within the ecosystem, or with all the components moving, and how to secure the API server, that's the databases, and just running your workloads in a safe way. There's a lot to consider. So we've been looking at this and trying to help users over the last, since we pivoted to Kubernetes, but we definitely really ramped up our efforts in the last year. And so just kind of the journey, we started basically, when you look at at adopting Kubernetes enterprise strategy, one of the first things Gartner recommends is looking at security and governance, and hardening your cluster. They recommend the CIS standard. I think just broadly speaking, the industry looks to the CIS working groups to produce benchmarks that set the standard for what a secure deployment or implementation of technologies look like. And so starting last year, we started putting out the Rancher hardening guides to comply with the CIS benchmark. We also did self-assessment. So in areas that we found we needed to improve, we called those out. And so then just to keep up with the pace of these CVEs and the way that they're getting released, and just our users need to keep up to date in order to remain secure, patched. And so we released out-of-band Kubernetes updates. And then we've also added cluster templates, which once you have a standard configuration that's hardened, how do you ensure that all your clusters are following that standard and ensuring that they're compliant? And then over the last year, we've also been, we looked at the initial hardening guide, and I think some of the early feedback we got was, wow, there's a lot to do here that I have to do with another system. And so we've been pulling those components in into the RKE provisioning tool that most users use when using Rancher to provision and build out their clusters. So you can now add the encryption provider. You can now add audit log configs without having to write those with an Ansible or a Terraform system. These things are all now part of the product, and those particular configuration bits can be locked in with the cluster templates. And so looking at the initial, in the way we are today is, you can configure and provision, and we've kind of got these two pieces locked down. But where we wanted to take it, complete the cycle in 2.4 was to bring in the ability to observe your running state and see how it's running, and then you can update it and configure and provision. So this now completes the loop so that you can have a constant feedback cycle on how your cluster is configured and is it compliant with what you're expecting it to be today. And so we've built in the CIS scanning benchmark tool. We'll be updating this using the Rancher catalog mechanism. So as new updates are available, we'll be able to update those for you, and you'll be able to see if you're compliant or if there's new best practices. You'll be able to run these reports, these scans ad hoc or scheduled, and get a report from them, and then hand that off to your InfoSec teams or for auditing purposes. You'll be able to share those out. So that's bringing it into 2.4. This is what we're doing for CIS, and to help you stay consistent and secure within the product. Before I hand it off to Murali to do the demo, this might be a good time to take a few questions.
Yeah, so we have some questions. If any of these need to be, if you want to punt these to Murali, if he will be covering them in his demo, then that's fine. So Shannon asked if there's an ETA for, he referenced an issue, but it's about encrypting root EBS volumes. Do you know if that's in the roadmap?
I know we're looking at different improvements on the configuration bits, but the specific issue I'm not sure on. We could follow up offline on that one.
Okay, so Shannon, if you could just go to that issue and add a comment, that you'd like more information on it or whatever, we can take a look. We have a question now from Dean, who asks if there are ways to secure etcd in an enterprise. If there is any standard that we see enterprises following, or any recommendations about securing etcd.
Yeah, I mean, the CIS benchmark has some good guidelines on what to do within just running it securely. Your basic least privilege, the way Rancher sets it up, it uses mutual TLS to authenticate to the etcd cluster, and so then through network partitioning and firewalling, you can isolate the etcd cluster from the rest of the worker nodes, and so that they're only accessible via the masters or the control plane nodes for Kubernetes. Just your basic network partitioning and certs and yeah.
Okay, all right. The last question that we have for right now is from Reno, who asks, not sure if I understand this question exactly, is there any plan to get a roadmap of the CIS document, or can you explain how the process will be to get new CIS for new versions of Kubernetes? Does that make sense? If not, I can ask him to clarify.
Well, I can take a pass at it.
Okay.
The CIS document is actually, the CIS benchmark is published by the CIS, I forget what the Center for information security, that working group, and they produce the documents, and anyone can join and actually, see the documents in progress and in flight. And so, those are, we follow those closely, and we're involved in the discussions on different components. When those are published, that's on their release cadence. Once those are published, we bring those in and start getting the updates to the guides, the Rancher hardening guides on the Security Center. Within a few weeks is our target. The thing to keep in mind, though, is the benchmarks are tied to a specific Kubernetes version, and we do our best to sort of, work, our understanding of what Kubernetes is to see how they apply. Extrapolate the data to forward versions, but that's, that work that takes a little bit longer and is done on our side.
Got it. Yeah, he had some clarification. I'm not sure Reno is I apologize if I get the gender wrong here. The clarification was when new releases of the CIS document come out, how do we apply that to new releases? And it sounds like you said, well, that those will be available for application within the cluster against future versions of Kubernetes. Is that correct? Yeah,
we extrapolate those out for versions. So for instance, 1.4 was against Kubernetes 1.13, I believe, and then 1.5 was for 1.15. So now 16 and 17 there's no benchmark for those yet.
Got it.
And so we do our best to sort of take what was in the 1.15 and see if it makes sense for the 1.16 and 17.
Okay, great.
And
so those are the only. Oh, go ahead, Morley.
Sorry, Adrian. I think one more point to add to what Bill has said. I think we are planning to ship like CIS compliant cluster templates also, right, Bill? Is that a right statement?
Yeah, there is work that we're planning to have templates that are pre-built that will will comply with the CIS benchmark. They're currently published as part of the hardening guide, but there's plans to bring them into the product.
Very cool. So I have no more questions right now, but before I hand this off to Morley for his demo, we are getting questions that are not specific to the content of the meetup. I'm going to flag those to try and answer them at the end if we have time. But if we don't answer them, we'll try to get to them elsewhere. So if you guys can just try to keep the questions more in line with the security context or the things that you're seeing here, that'll help us out a lot.
I'm going to make you presenter, Adrian.
Okay. And then I will immediately bounce the presenter status to Morley. Morley, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Making you the presenter. Dun, dun, dun. Awesome. We see your screen.
Awesome. Cool. Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you all virtually on this online meetup. I'm very excited to kind of show you what we have been working on for the past few months. So here I have a Rancher setup, and I have a few cluster setup already to save some time for the demo. So let's dive right in and then see, how we can run a CIS scan and how we can look at the results. So I have this cluster. Let's look at this test lineout cluster. And once we jump into a cluster context, we will be able to find the CIS scans option under the tools here. And once we navigate, we have this new UI page built where we can run the scans. So once you click a scan, behind the scenes, Rancher does all the heavy lifting where it figures out what Kubernetes version this particular cluster is running on, and what is the latest CIS benchmark that is associated with this particular Kubernetes version, and it deploys all the needed components on the nodes of the cluster. It runs a scan, it collects all the results from all the nodes, and then it aggregates them and populates this report. And finally, as you can see, the report is shown in this page. So this is the summary page. Like, if you want to run multiple scans, you'll be able to see them. And if you want to dive into a specific scan result, you can click on it, and you can see what tests have been performed here. So here you can see there is a number associated, there is a number associated with each test. So these are actually coming directly from the benchmark guide. So if you look at the CIS 1.4 benchmark guide here, these numbers correspond to what you see in the UI. Like 112 is ensure basic auth file, blah blah blah. So you see the same thing here, and you can see the status of each of the tests that has been run. So this cluster that has been created was created without any of the hardening guide taken into consideration. So you see a lot of failures here. So let me show you. So basically, once you run a scan, you will be able to figure out, which of the recommendations are missing in your cluster, and you can figure out what is the remediation step associated for that test, and you can take action on that. So what this would require is you go to the cluster, and then you can edit the cluster, and you can edit the various options of the cluster, and you can enable those options, and the cluster will start becoming CIS compliant. So I have another cluster which is completely compliant. So let me quickly run a scan on that. So this is a different cluster which is CIS compliant, and if I run a scan, you should be able to see the results in a minute. So the whole idea of this feature, like Bill had mentioned earlier, is it provides visibility into the settings of your Kubernetes cluster, and its main goal is to make it as secure as possible based on the recommendations from the community. CIS benchmark guide is very popular and very valued in the community, and the newer versions are released frequently with a lot of inputs from a lot of security researchers and other folks who are active in the security community. Yeah, so here the result, the scan is finished, and we can see a summary of the results. And if you want to dive in, we can click on it, and we can see most of the tests are passing. And here, for example, we have this particular recommendation from CIS, hey, you should not be using hostname override argument for the kubelet. But RKE, it actually uses that argument because we run into a situation where different cloud providers will not set the hostname of the node properly. So RKE generates a unique name for that node and uses that to generate the SSL certificate. So that's why our CIS, even though the CIS benchmark kind of recommends the setting, we feel that in our RKE case, it's actually more secure to not go by this recommendation. So basically, what happens is when you run the scan, you would see a failure for this 2.1.8. So if, let's say, you understand the explanation that we have provided and you are okay to skip this, so all you have to do is just click the skip button next to this failed test, and the next time when you actually run the scan, what happens is that particular recommendation is skipped, so it won't show up as a failure. So that's another nice feature that we have implemented to make the usage much easier. So here you can see in the next scan, if this particular recommendation has been skipped. And the other thing that I wanted to show you is how this whole scan functionality fits into the cluster templates is, excuse me, when you are trying to create a new cluster And here with the new cluster templates option, you have this new checkbox. So once I check this box, here you can see, I have created RKE template ahead of time to save some time, obviously. And you can use this to create new clusters which are already CIS compliant. So with this, what happens is, you in your organization, you might have certain requirements where the clusters need to be CIS compliant, or they have to adhere to certain tests to be passing, or some of the tests can be skipped. So you can create a template, and then you can use these templates to enforce creation of secure Kubernetes clusters. So these two features kind of are related to each other. They help improve the security of the Kubernetes clusters in an organization. And the other thing is, with this scans, you can actually detect, if there has been any change made in any of the nodes. So you can detect that. So let me show you how we can do that. So let's say,
Hey, Murali,
go ahead.
Murali, if I could interrupt you really quick, can you zoom your browser in a couple of notches with Command Plus? Because your resolution is pretty high and people on smaller windows are having a difficult time seeing.
Okay.
Yeah, if you could even go one more.
I think, okay. Is it?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, man.
Okay, cool. So let me quickly show you, how how the scan functionality is useful to detect any drift. So let's say, we take up any of the permissions, permission. So here it says, let me pick certificate file. So this particular recommendation says that all the SSL private key files should be having a permission of 600, to make sure they are not abused by users in a system. So let me kind of manually change that on the node, and then I'll show you how the scan can detect that. So let me increase the font of this one as well. So this is the same node that we are on. I think, yeah, this is the C1 cluster. Yes. So here, if I go here, this is where we store the certificate files. And let's say I change the permissions of this particular file to 755. And then let's run the scan again. There you see, we have a new failure. So let's jump in. And if we scroll down, we can see, the tests have failed. So this is how the scan is useful to detect drift in your Kubernetes clusters. And that would be very helpful once we add the ability to kind of run scheduled CIS scans. So this is kind of an overview of the whole CIS scan feature. Is there anything else that I can talk about, or Bill, Adrian, do you have any suggestions or pointers?
Nothing else as far as the demo, but if you don't have anything more to show, we have an army of questions that I can start throwing at you.
Sure.
Okay, give me just a second here. All right, so Daniel wants to know if the CIS scan feature will be enabled by, can you still share your screen though?
Oh, okay.
Just in case you have to demo any response or something. So Daniel wants to know if the CIS scan feature will be enabled by default. And I guess let me combine that with another question. So somebody else is asking about automated or periodic scanning. So maybe you can combine the two of those into an answer. Do we have periodic scanning? And if so, is scanning enabled by default?
So, so there is no automatic scanning or a periodic scanning option available right now. At this point, it is a manual run. So, the user has to go in and then click a run scan. But using the API, you can kind of run a cron job to trigger the scans, periodically, at least for now. But we are definitely considering to add that functionality going forward.
Okay. Can you kick off scans via an API call?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, I can quickly show you that. It shouldn't take.
Yeah, okay.
So this is the API of the cluster. And here you can see there is a run security scan option. And once you click on show request, you'll be able to find the curl command associated with this particular action. So you can just do a curl with your access and secret keys, and you will trigger a new CIS scan.
Marley, did I miss the part in the demo where the CSV report was also?
Yes, thank you, Bill. I totally missed that. Let me show you quickly where we can download this report in a CSV file. Thank you, Bill.
Yep.
Here you go. Here is the CSV file. You can find the CIS version, the recommendation number. You can find the description, remediation, and you can find the state, whether it's a pass or a failure, on what type of node it is, if it's a master node or a worker node, and on what nodes a particular recommendation has failed. So you will be able to find all that information in the downloaded report as well. The same thing is available in the UI too. Let me quickly show you in the UI. I did not expand this particular thing. So if I expand this, you can see this particular cluster has only one host. But let's say if I go to this particular cluster, which has like 8 hosts, and if I expand any of the past tests, you can see that this is passing on these 2 nodes. And if you actually look at the cluster nodes, you can see there are like multiple nodes here, and we would be able to figure out whether it is a master node. So these are the 2 master nodes. So it's passed, the test runs on the master nodes, and it is a pass on the master nodes. You can find that information. And if you look at the failures, you can see it failed on the master nodes. In the same way, if you go to a different section, this one, passed on 2 of the nodes and it failed on 3 of them. So you'll be able to find this same information once you download the CSV report.
Yeah, and then it's useful to be able to hand the report off to, if there's other teams that you have to show that you're complying with the benchmark, or if you need to show your security or operations team or another group, you can share this information with them.
Right, yes.
Yeah. Just looking at the questions, it might be good to sort of walk through a little bit kind of behind the scenes on how new versions will get updated. So like, for instance, if yesterday we were running 1.4.1 and 1.5 comes out, or running 1.5.
I can talk about it. So in Rancher, we have a functionality which is basically we can get the updates behind the scenes. You don't need to update the Rancher version to get the latest updates, and we call it like a container driver metadata. So you can find the information, or you can find the source code about that project or that feature here. So the container driver metadata. So what happens is when we release a new Kubernetes version, and once we have a new CIS benchmark available, we would update the container driver metadata, and a Rancher install, it keeps polling this repository for updates. And once it sees the updates, it figures out, oh, for this particular Kubernetes version, we have a new CIS benchmark that I need to use. So the next time when you do a run scan, it will automatically pick up the latest CIS benchmark that's available for that particular Kubernetes version. So right now, we have 1.4, CIS 1.4 supported, and once we have added 1.5, when you run scan, 115 and above, Kubernetes versions 115 and above will start using CIS 1.5 benchmark scan. So that's how the updates are kind of handled. So it's like you don't have to upgrade your Rancher version. You will get the updates out of band using this mechanism.
Yeah, assuming you're not on an air-gapped network. And yeah, and the reason we tie the Kubernetes version to the benchmark version is because the CIS benchmarks are pinned to a version of Kubernetes at the time that they're published. So
correct. Yeah, that is true. Here, just to see, you can see the CIS 1.5 is for Kubernetes 115, and if you see 1.4, it would say it's for 113. So that's the reason we need to kind of have this mapping.
Yeah, and so just to walk through the benchmark a little bit more too, because we've got a question from Adrian that the rules don't apply to every node, or why one might apply to two nodes and not the others. And so, do you want to walk through that, or?
Yeah, sure. So here is the benchmark guide for version 1.4. So the way this document is organized is like there are like two top level sections. The section 1 is a master node, and the section 2 is for a worker node. And so when you say master node, it's like the nodes which are running the Kube API server controller manager, they fall under this particular section 1. And under this section, there are like subsections which talk about specific Kubernetes components and how do you secure them. So 1.1 is about how do you secure API server? What are the arguments that you need to either set or not set, or whether it's a Boolean argument, or if it is like you have to pass a certain port number or pass a certain value, what is the appropriate thing to do? So that's all described in this document. And you have options for scheduler, controller manager, what are the configuration files associated with it, and things like that. So because of this, section 1 is applicable for control plane nodes, and the worker nodes is applicable for like kind of wherever the kubelet is running. So it's that particular reasoning for a particular recommendation running or applicable to a certain nodes is coming from this benchmark guide. So this is the source of truth for us. And so 1.5, there are like few other changes, like there are like new sections introduced, and like there are like some new recommendations, and some of the things have been moved around, the layout has changed and things like that. So this is like a living document which gets updated every so often. And we will, once a new version is released, we will try to provide support for that in few weeks, like Bill mentioned.
Yeah. And we do allow, so this 115 version, the 1.5 is tied to 115, but we will allow you to run the 1.5 benchmark against the 116 and 17 cluster, right?
Correct, yes. So let me quickly show you that as well. So you have this cluster. Let me zoom out a little bit. It's not rendering properly. So once I click on the run security scan, here you can see, you can override the benchmark version. And, let's say if you are doing like you are in a development cycle and you are trying to figure out what arguments you need to pass, or what options you need to enable or disable for for making your cluster CIS compliant. You can use like either the override benchmark version, or you can use the override skip options. So skip is like basically skip these tests. So if there are like failures, you don't want to run them, you can just specify those test numbers here, like 112. I don't want to run this, and you can specify that. So yeah, you can run an older benchmark version on a cluster.
Okay. And this will be available on RKE clusters at launch. And then
right. So yeah, so basically the thing is like for some of these managed clusters, the problem is we don't have access to the control plane components. So what that means is, if you look at the benchmark guide, like if you remember, we saw section 1, it's all related to master node. You have API server, control manager, and things like that. So we won't be able to run the scan for these components because we don't have any access to them. Like, for example, if you are using EKS, we have no visibility into it. So even like once we have support for other kind of clusters, we would be able to do a partial scan. Like we'd be able to do only the worker or section 2, which is like the worker nodes. So yeah, but at launch time, it's only for RKE clusters. Going forward, we will try to add support for other kind of clusters as well.
Yep. And so yeah, it'll be RKE clusters, which is either the custom cluster that you've provisioned using the registration command, or Rancher provision nodes using one of the Rancher node drivers. So the new vSphere stuff that we've been doing in 2.3x, it'll absolutely be able to be used with that.
What if you launched an RKE cluster standalone and then imported it? Would it still work?
I think it should work, but I can test it, and then I can kind of add that information in the documentation section.
From our testing, morality, the performance characteristics we're getting asked, does the benchmark impact our performance at all?
No, not really. So behind the scenes, we use an open source tool called Kubench, and if you look at that repository, you can see like it's a kind of a simple script. What it does is it gathers the PS output and then parses all the arguments that are passed to the various Kubernetes components, and then does like a comparison, string comparison, and it's like very minimal compute that's required, and there is no huge memory requirements for running these tests. So there's like literally not much impact on an existing cluster.
And today, those tests, we have a question if it'll work on Windows, and I don't think that applies to Windows yet.
No. So the thing is like, even the upstream, the CIS benchmark guide itself, like they haven't taken Windows into consideration. So at this point, we do not support Windows clusters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just again, just to recap, because we have a couple questions about the air gap setups. The way Rancher delivers the catalog today, it's either we have the out-of-band updates where Rancher will periodically sync if it has availability to connect to the internet directly. If you do not, then we have scripts that help you mirror all the images, and all the metadata is shipped with Rancher. And so in order to get those updates, then you would have to update your version of Rancher to do that. we are looking at ways to sort of simplify that, but today that it's sort of, you need to upgrade the Rancher installation to get the updated metadata when you're running outside of, off of, when you don't have access to the internet. We do have one question. Can we define our own custom baseline for setting the scan? Do you want to talk to that, or?
Go ahead, Bill.
Sure. So when you get the scan, when you have a cluster, you do an initial scan to kind of understand where you're at. The current workflow is that you would then read through the report and to understand where the cluster currently is, and then skip the tests that are not applicable for the cluster that you're running. So if there was something you can't always pull images because you're in a bandwidth constrained environment, and you're making that trade-off, then you can skip that test, and then future scans won't include it. And so you can kind of tailor the scanning of the cluster to what you need it to be. And that is defined on a per cluster basis. Great. Adrian, are you seeing any other questions that I'm missing?
I'm just going through and trying to close the questions as you guys answer them. There's only, what, CIS benchmarks? Did you ask the question about can we diff CIS benchmarks and see what's changed?
No,
I doubt it's difficult, right?
Yeah.
The best that you can kind of figure out is, like, if you go to the repository that's kind of hosting the source code, you might be able to figure out, like, the code section. So yeah.
I mean, in particular, like the 1.4 benchmark to the 1.5 benchmark, they restructured the whole document, so it would have been a pure diff. Like, it would have been all changed. We just went through we have the self-assessment guides coming up pretty soon here. So you'll be able to, it's a bit of an exercise. And so the updates will come, and then you'll be able to run the scans. And so I think having the tool like this to show you the automation, like in an automated fashion, to say, hey, you were passing and now you are no longer passing, or here's, there's a new version of the benchmark, and here's where you're no longer compliant with the best practices. And again, at that point, you can assess whether that's applicable for you, because there are occasions where you would make a trade-off, but it's good to know that you're doing what trade-offs you're making, and that you're making them consciously versus kind of just hoping.
So those are all of the red questions. This is an hour long, right?
It is. And just one more time, there is a preview release. It's Rancher 2.4.0, I believe Alpha 1, and that does include the CIS benchmark feature, along with the updated global roles that we were talking about earlier. It would be under Alpha or 2.4.0. Yeah. So this release here does contain the CIS feature at its current preview state. We definitely would love to get your feedback as you have a chance to download and play with it, and let us know how the feature is shaping up. Again, these are to be used in a lab setting only. Do not upgrade a production system to the alpha software. There's no upgrade path from the alpha software to the production version. It is an unsupported path, but you will be able to go from 2.3 to 2.4 directly when it's ready. But we do encourage you to stand it up and see, test out these features, and we'd love to get the feedback. You can reach us in Slack, or you can reach us through GitHub issues or the forums. We're trying to make ourselves as available as possible so that we can hear everything.
So since we have only a few minutes left, I think we should go ahead and wrap up this, and then I'll try to address any of these remaining questions just in text, and we can let everybody else go. Actually, there's one question here that might be for you, Bill. Was there any changes to monitoring and logging coming in 2.4?
We've been slowly adjusting monitoring, as we go. We're trying to get it in a handful of fixes just to improve it. I know most recently, we added you can deploy the Thanos sidecar now, and we're continuing to improve. Overall, where we're trying to go is expanding the configuration options that are available to you, and also extending the cluster level monitoring so that custom metrics can be added to that. That's work that we're trying to get scheduled in. Don't have a hard date on when that'll be available. Logging is going to be a key component, kind of a post 2.4.0 follow-up. We're looking at sort of doing like a V2 version of it and redoing a lot of the way it's plumbed under the hood.
We're getting some last minute questions coming through here that I'm just trying to address, make sure there's nothing else that needs to be loud. So slides for this will be available on, we post these to SlideShare, don't we, Matthew? Matthew, are you still here? Shouldn't be calling out people who've been muted for an hour. I'm pretty sure these go up on SlideShare. Yeah.
We will post these, everybody will get them, yep.
Okay, great. So yeah, so the video will be up on YouTube. If you got thrown a link to this and you didn't register directly, you can find the video up on the Rancher's YouTube channel. The slides will be up on SlideShare, and otherwise, if you did register for it, you'll get a link with all of that information. So next week, we are having a Kubernetes masterclass that will give you specific actionable information on how to harden your Kubernetes clusters with Rancher. So if you're not already registered for that, there's a really long link here that I will leave up there so you can very quickly write it down. But you can also go to rancher.com, and we have an events section there that will talk about masterclasses, and you can find the registration link there. Also on rancher.com, if you're looking for more information about security with Rancher, you should check out our security center. So that's part of rancher.com/docs. If you go under the Rancher section, there's in the left-hand sidebar, there's an area for security, and there you will find hardening guides, self-assessment guides, reporting, and reports on penetration testing. So there's a lot of good information there. We do keep that updated, and as new information is made available, that's where you're going to find the updates. Certainly, if there's something that you have a question about, you can find us on the Rancher user Slack. You can also open issues in GitHub, and well, I guess we're pretty much all over the place. There's forums, there's Slack, there's GitHub. Let us know what you would like to see. Oh, and that's the end of the slideshow. I don't have a thank you slide. So we still have like 2 minutes left. I want to thank you all for coming. And I'm just going to go through the last of these questions here. So if you did ask a question and you're waiting for it to be answered, if you want to hang out, you'll see an answer come through from me in just a second. You got people saying, thank you for all the CIS work. You're very welcome. Security is fundamentally important in Kubernetes. As it goes, as more enterprises adopt it, the cost of security, like the importance of it cannot be understated, and the cost of making mistakes is astronomical. So we want to make sure that Kubernetes clusters that you deploy with Rancher are as secure as possible, and that you have all of the tools necessary to make informed decisions about what your clusters need. Oh my God, we're getting bombarded with thank you. So you're welcome. So I'm just going to mute myself and answer some questions here at the end. So again, thank you all for coming. I'll leave this slide up in case you want to copy down any of these links, and we will see you all next time.